When working with families of out-of-control teens, I find that they all have one thing in common, and that is the parents have unintentionally set up a dependency cycle. Before we look at the cycle, I need to define two terms. When I use the term stuff, I'm referring to things like designer clothes, TV, computer, video games, money, anything other than basic necessities. When I use the term freedom, I'm referring to activities, freedom from rules, freedom from chores, freedom from discipline, freedom from meeting a few reasonable parental expectations. The dependency cycle starts out like this. We as parents want to bond with our children, and we want them to be happy because we love them. Maybe we want them to have it better than we had it. Maybe we feel sorry for them for some reason. Whatever the reason is, the bottom line is we want to bond with them. We want them to be happy because we love them. As a result, we have, out of a well-intentioned, loving heart, given our kids too much stuff or too much freedom or both. We just handed it out for free. They didn't earn any of it, or they earned very little of it. Consequently, our children became dependent on us for the free handouts of stuff and freedom. We didn't teach them to earn stuff and freedom for themselves. As a result of the dependency that we set up, our kids are literally emotionally underdeveloped. You may have a 16-year-old kid who's emotionally a little more like 9 years old. Because of the dependency, they also developed a sense of resentment. Wherever there's dependency, resentment's not far behind. If you have a minority group who's dependent on a majority group, there's resentment. If you have one spouse who's dependent on the other spouse, there's resentment. If you have a kid who's dependent on the parent for handouts, there's resentment. Also, because of the dependency, the kid has a strong sense of entitlement. In other words, the kid believes that you owe him. He shouldn't have to earn anything. And because of the dependency, the kid also has this insatiable appetite for more and more stuff and freedom, or both. So the cycle starts out that we want to bond with our children, we want them to be happy. What we ended up with is we feel detached from our kids and they seem so damn unhappy. When I work with parents of out-of-control teens, the mother and or the father say, you know, this kid doesn't appreciate anything I do for him. He's very disrespectful. And the reason is handouts create disrespect. Let's use the example of a young couple. Sarah is 18 and Michael is 19, and Sarah wants Michael to love her. She wants Michael to propose and marry her and have a family with Michael. And so she lets Michael have sex whenever he wants it. She doesn't wait until she gets married to have sex. She doesn't wait until he proposes to let him have sex. She just hands it out for free without any commitment. Now, is Michael going to respect Sarah? Absolutely not. The reason is free handouts, no matter what it is, creates disrespect. When we as parents provide little opportunity for the kids to earn their stuff and freedom, we end up overindulging the kid. Overindulgent parenting is associated with kids who are verbally aggressive, physically aggressive. They're overly dependent on the parent. They have less concern for others. In other words, they have difficulty empathizing or putting themselves in someone else's shoes to see how they might feel. It's also associated with kids who are self-centered and temperamental. They lack motivation. In other words, you can't get them to do much of anything, and they're very manipulative. What are some of the reasons parents would overindulge their kid outside of the fact that they thought they were doing a loving and caring thing? Well, some of us don't have much money, so we compensate by giving the kid a lot of freedom. Some of us overindulge because we feel guilty for some reason, maybe because of having to work all the time and we don't have that much opportunity to be at home with the kid. Sometimes we overindulge as a response to a major life event, like death of a loved one. Sometimes we feel sorry for the kid, maybe because of divorce or because the father doesn't come around anymore. Sometimes we overindulge because we're afraid of the kid. For example, daughter comes home and tells mom she's going to go over to so-and-so's house. Mom says, no, you're not. An argument takes place, and finally mom says, fine, just go, because she doesn't want to have to deal with another hour-long, knockdown, drag-out argument. Some of the results of overindulgence are the kid is in charge rather than the parent. He feels entitled to privileges, but at the same time not responsible for his actions. Another result is the kid doesn't get along well with authority figures. He believes the rules simply don't apply to him. In many cases, the kid has so much stuff at home, the Xbox, the Y box, the boom box, the videos, and the this and that. It's almost like an amusement park at home. Then when he goes to school, it's entirely too boring. There's not enough stimulus, and so he gets labeled ADHD, and in many cases gets suspended or expelled from school. So how do we break the dependency cycle? Well, we got to replace it with a self-reliance cycle. And this cycle starts out just like the dependency cycle did. We want to bond with our children, and we want them to be happy and responsible for their behavior and choices. So we help our children learn to earn. We help them purchase material things with their own money. That could be from an allowance, or money earned by doing chores, or money earned from their place of employment. And perhaps most importantly, we help our children earn their freedom. And they can earn their freedom by following rules, by doing chores, by accepting discipline for misbehavior, by meeting a few reasonable parental expectations. So now that the kids are earning their stuff in freedom, you've taken dependency out of the equation and replaced it with self-reliance. If you have a kid who's self-reliant, you have a kid who's for the most part not doing drugs, for the most part not skipping school, for the most part showing some respect at home. This self-reliance boosts their emotional development. So instead of having a kid who's chronologically 16 but emotionally 9, you have a kid who's chronologically 16 and emotionally 16. This self-reliance also reduces their resentment and their sense of entitlement and their need for more and more and more. So this cycle starts out, we want to bond with our children, we want them to be happy, and that's what we end up getting. We, as parents, feel bonded to our kids, and they do seem happier. There are two potential areas for conflict between you and your kid. The first area is when your kid wants something from you. For example, when he wants to acquire material items, or receive a privilege, or gain attention, or avoid following a rule. When he wants to avoid doing a chore, or avoid receiving a discipline, or avoid meeting a parental expectation. The second potential area for conflict is when you want something from your kid. For example, when you want your kid to follow a rule, or do a chore, or accept an appropriate discipline, or meet a reasonable parental expectation. We're going to look at each of these categories. We'll start with what to do when your kid wants something from you. Okay, so when your kid wants something from you, your answer is probably either going to be yes or no. If your answer is yes, then this is a golden opportunity for your kid to earn what he's asking for. We want your child to learn to earn so that he'll begin to develop self-reliance. So, if your answer is yes, say yes, but attach it to something that can be earned. For example, child says, I'm going over to so-and-so's to play basketball. Parent says, fine, as soon as you get your homework done. Or the child says, I'm hungry. Parent says, okay, we'll cook something together, then we'll both wash the dishes. Or the child says, I want Sean to spend the night Saturday night. Parent says, okay, but you need to vacuum your room and pick up your clothes. The kid says, I want to borrow the car Sunday. Parent says, okay, fine, but you'll need to wash it and vacuum the inside. So whenever your kid asks something of you, provide an opportunity for them to earn. No more handouts. Parents ask me, well, what does this mean? That the kid is going to have to earn everything from now on? The answer is a profound yes. Even if you're walking around Walmart and your child wants $1 for a Coke, the answer is no. You could say, the answer is no for now, but if you'll take out the trash later or mow the grass, then you can earn some money, and then you'll have money for a Coke the next time we come out here. Now, when your kid wants something from you and the answer is no, here's what we do. We say no one time. We state our reason for saying no one time. And we tell the kid what she can do to earn what she wants if the answer would ever be yes. Now, your kid is going to try to whittle your no into a maybe and then into a yes. And as they do that, you put on your best poker face. You act as if you're not getting angry. You provide very little intensity and energy. And you sound like a broken record by stating, I'm not going to argue. Your kid's going to go, well, that's not fair, blah, 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 rap, rap. And you come back with, I'm not going to argue. If your kid threatens to do what she wants anyway without your permission, then you say, if you choose to do this without my permission, you'll choose a consequence, which will be blah, blah, blah. And pick the least restrictive thing first. For example, if your daughter enjoys the phone, you could say, if you choose to do this without my permission, you'll choose a consequence, which is no phone for this evening. Now, if she goes ahead and does what she wants anyway without your permission, then you say, because you chose to do that without my permission, you chose a consequence, which is no phone this evening. If she refuses to accept that consequence, then you take everything away, or at least her favorite stuff, and ground her for 3 days. If she has a temper tantrum when she finds out that she's losing all her favorite stuff and going to be grounded for 3 days, then the 3 days doesn't start until she calms down. Here's an example of how the art of saying no plays out. And this is an example from a mother that attended the parent group. Child says, hey, Mom, I'm going over to Kara's house. Parent says, no, not tonight. You notice Mom said no only one time there. Child says, why not? Parent says, because it's 9:30, your curfew's 10. The last time I let you go to Kara's house, you didn't get home until 11. You can go to Kara's tomorrow if you'll have your chores done, if you'll go earlier in the evening. Now here, Mom stated her reason for saying no one time, and then she told her child what she could do to earn the privilege. Now, the kid's going to continue to argue, right? So here's an example of the child distorting the facts. The child says, I did not get home at 11 p.m. I got home just a few minutes after 10. Now, Mom puts on her best poker face because she's getting a little irritated, and she says, like a broken record, I'm not going to argue. Well, the child's not done arguing, right? Here's an example of the child sweetening the deal. The child says, I'm just going to run over there and pick up a school book. I'll be right back. Now, ordinarily, Mom would go, well, she's just going to run over there for a minute and get a school book. Okay, go ahead and go. No, not this time. Parent says, I'm not going to argue. Then the child says, and here's an example of applying a guilt trip. Child says, well, you let Sarah go to her friend's house after 9:30 the other night. Now, ordinarily, Mom would go, yeah, she's right, I did. Okay, go ahead and go. Nope, not this time. Parent says, with her poker face, I'm not going to argue. Now, the child, applying an insult, mocks the parent. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue. Is that all you can say? You suck. Now, Mom, showing no emotion, says, I'm not going to argue. The child continues to push it, right? Does this sound like your kid? Here's an example of your child ignoring your request. She said, this is bullshit. You can't tell me what to do. So now Mom is going to give her parent warning. And she says, with her poker face, if you choose to go to Kara's, then you'll choose a consequence, which will be grounding for 3 days and no phone privileges. Because as I recall, this particular child really liked being on the phone. So, the child says, well, we'll see about that, and walks out the door and slams the door. She doesn't get home until 11:15 p.m. Now, when the kid returns, Mom's going to enforce that discipline. And she says, because you chose to ignore my request, you also chose a consequence, which is grounding for 3 days and no phone. Then the parent follows up by telling her daughter exactly what she can do to get, or actually what she must do to earn her way off discipline. So Mom says, you'll be ungrounded in 3 days and you'll get the phone back if you come straight home from school every day this week. Now, here are some points to keep in mind when you're using the art of saying no. Try to make your timeline anywhere from 1 evening to 7 days, but 3 days works best. Only use 7 days for the worst case scenarios. When we discipline our strong-willed, out-of-control kids, grounding and taking away all privileges works best. The 3-day discipline works because it fits the way that the kids think, not the way that we think. Okay, 3 days is an eternity to a kid. So don't feel like you're getting off the hook by just going 3 days. Now, if your kid is grounded and breaks another house rule, just simply restart the 3 days. For example, let's say your child completes 1 day of a 3-day discipline for getting suspended from school. And then on the second day, he sneaks out of the house to be with his buddy. So mom simply restarts the 3-day discipline over again. This kind of keeps restrictions from piling up, because your child's more likely to hang in there if he can see light at the end of the tunnel. So you can't control your kid, but you can control the things that he enjoys. His television, his video games, his freedom for activities, junk food, toiletries, favorite clothes, bedroom doors, cell phones, and so on. So while your kid may not be willing to work for the things that you want, he's usually willing to work for the things that he wants. So by controlling the things that he wants, you can influence him to change unwanted behaviors. I have parents say, well, where do I put the stuff that I take from my kid? Well, some parents designate a closet with a padlock on it, and they store confiscated stuff in there. Some parents put the kids' things in the trunk of their car or at a neighbor's house. Some parents have even been known to throw less expensive items away. Some parents say, well, how am I supposed to get my kid's computer or his television in the trunk of my car? Well, here we have to be creative. There's always a simple way to confiscate. Just take the computer keyboard, for example, rather than the whole keyboard. Just take the cable cord to the television. PlayStation controllers, DVDs, CDs, cell phones, all those things are really easy to hide. So, if the item's too big to carry out of the kid's room, just disable it somehow. Take possession of a vital cord that connects the CD player to the speakers, for example. I've had some parents who go, well, I confiscated my kid's stuff and now some of my stuff is missing. So if your kid returns the favor by taking or hiding some of your things, then put your poker face on and tell him that the 3-day discipline doesn't start until you get your stuff back. And if he continues to keep your things, you may need to be willing to call the police and be willing to press charges in order to convince your kid that taking your stuff is actually theft and has an additional consequence.